Hello and welcome. We're here today to talk about all things hybrid meetings, and we're going to jump straight in with a question to Sabina Adam. What is a hybrid meeting?
Hi, Jeff. Yeah, well, that's a good question. We have to really think, is the former digital and a physical audience and the speakers are physically on site? Is it a studio with speakers broadcasting to a virtual audience? Or maybe a physical meeting having virtual speakers broadcast in? How do the physical and digital participants interact? Or is it even a conference which is broadcasted via different hubs? So that's also an interesting format. And there's one thing we have to always remember: never copy paste.
Perfect, thank you. So what I'm hearing there is that a hybrid meeting is a format of a meeting. And to perhaps illustrate the difference between the traditional and the hybrid that Sabina is talking about, we can have a look here. On the left, we see a traditional format set up with the speaker, one speaking to many people all in one place. And on the right-hand side, we can see the hybrid presentation style, where we may have a speaker who's physical or digital. We have an audience that is also physical or digital, all in one place or separated through time and space, so to speak. But what makes a hybrid meeting useful? Why is it a good format?
Well, you can say it in a very few words. The most successful hybrid meetings are those that can blur the lines between the digital and physical engagement and both drive traffic to the other, because that's the advantage.
Super, thank you. Now, through the pandemic, there's been a rapid uptake of digital meetings, and now as we look towards the future, hybrid meetings. However, hybrid meetings have been around for many, many years. The pandemic has forced a lot of change through different parts of our population. Governments, economies have all been forced to change and rethink things. But one part of the population that's seen a very rapid uptake in hybrid meetings are those that are currently studying. So to share her experience with what it's been like to move to a hybrid model is Naomi. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin, perhaps you could say a couple of words, who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm Noemi. I'm a third-year medical student in Lithuania, and I'm currently in Germany right now due to a pandemic.
And talking of the pandemic, can you share with us how have your studies been affected or changed due to the pandemic?
Yeah, my studies have changed greatly. Since in the beginning of the pandemic, they started having everything remotely. It was quite a big transition for our university and students to change from like face-to-face to remote. Lots of troubles were in there in the beginning, but at this point, everything works quite well. Everybody has adjusted really well. So I would say it's going great right now.
Okay, good. So the technology is pretty well on track.
Yes.
How about other things?
Well, right now, I would say there are like advantages and disadvantages to our situation. And disadvantages definitely our practical classes. They're not there anymore. We have them also online, which is not very useful, especially with med students. We should be in a hospital with the patient face to face, which we are not. So that's one of the big disadvantages. But I would say one of the really great advantages is about the lectures. Right now, we have a choice if I log in or not and just listen to them, because if it's face to face, I usually don't attend them because they just plain up throw information in your face, and it's not really necessary. I can do that by myself at home. So I really like that they give me this option and provide also the content still.
So if I've heard you correctly, you've chosen to select the way you study now. You've taken the information that would be rich in data or information, I guess, and do that on your own where it's easier to absorb. But the practical pieces, the pieces that you need to understand the implication for, that's where you're missing the face-to-face time. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
Fantastic. Yeah, very useful and interesting to think about for how we design meetings and events going forward. So how would you like to see meetings or events in the future?
Well, I would like to see the events in the future also be hybrid, because if I'm a doctor, I want to be have the choice. I want to choose if I want to go there, because it's quite important also to still attend them face to face for like the practical information you take away in these like conferences, or even just socializing is still important for us. But like also give us the option to have it online, since we are quite busy people, and having the option to have it online would like make life so much easier too.
Cool. So again, I think what I've just heard is you're going to maximize the use of your time, where and when you can learn something, and really be selective on the reason why you go somewhere.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. That's really interesting what Naomi has just shared with us, but perhaps not new or surprising. If we look back to 1960 with Edgar Dale, he completed a study on how we learn and the techniques around cognitive learning. Now, this study from the 1960s is still current and relevant today. It shows that when we read information or receive information passively, it's only the very front part of our brain, the neocortex, that's active. So there's a big part of our brain unused. As we go into listening, recall, and then explaining and coaching, so the practical sessions and the interaction that Naomi spoke about, this is where we get more activity happening through the brain. The limbic brain system's working, the neurocortex is working, and this is how we create memories. Now, this is super important for meeting design, especially for hybrids. What you can see through his studies is that only 5% of information that is spoken to us is retained. As we go down the pyramid and we get into more active formats, it's a much higher ability for people to recall and remember what it is they've learned.
Yes, and that is so true. And we really have to look when we do a meeting design, where are the passive parts and where are the active parts. And when you look at the pyramids, you can see that very, very clearly. And what Jeff has just mentioned. And I think it's very important that we consider this and really see it in a practical example. If you put a child in front of the television, it just watches and his brain goes kind of dump. And if you let them do something, if you let them draw something, if you whatever, then the brain starts really starting being active. And I think we have to design our conferences in the future considering these parts, because otherwise we get this very boring kind of conferences. But we have to, of course, give a mix, because we need to pass on information, but we also need to make sure that they actually take that information with them. Because if you ask a participant 2 weeks after what they have learned, if they just had lectures, they will not remember.
Yeah, and I see this as a really big opportunity for meetings, events, teaching all over them, as ways to make the most of the content. After all, when someone comes to a meeting or a conference, we want them to absorb that information, to use it, to apply it, to use the knowledge that they're gaining. So if we think carefully about the formats we're using and how we let people learn the information and then apply it, I think this hybrid model really has some great legs and some good opportunities ahead.
Absolutely. I fully agree. And thank you very much, Jeff, for talking together with me. And see you at the next Let's Talk Future session. And always remember, Congress Switzerland is here to help you to achieve what your participants deserve.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Take care.